Upon meeting her fiancé's parents, Lena feigned ignorance of the German language. What she overheard left her frozen in shock. Before we continue, please share your country of origin and your age. Enjoy the story. Lena stood by the window for a long time, watching the evening sun descend slowly down the wall of the adjacent building. A warm, hazel light fell on the windowsill, touched a flower in a terracotta pot, and glided over a vase holding water and a bouquet of daisies. The room smelled of vanilla, milk was cooling on the stove, and its gentle aroma brought a sense of ease. A pale dress with a neat collar lay on a chair. The dress was simple, but fit well. Lena traced a seam with her fingers, as if testing whether the fabric could withstand an encounter where every word, every glance, and every breath mattered. Today, she was to meet Andre's parents. Andre had been her fiancé for 6 months. He was quiet, attentive, and a little lost in thought when engrossed in his projects. He knew how to listen, how to be silent, how to bring ordinary pretzels for tea and declare them the best in the neighborhood. Lena felt at ease with him, yet the thought of meeting his parents caused a tremor within her, like the strings of an untuned violin. "The most important thing is to be yourself," Lena said aloud, as if encouraging her reflection rather than herself, "and to remember that everything is all right." She braided her hair into a simple plait, put on small stud earrings, applied a clear balm to her lips, and took a pre-baked apple and cinnamon pie from the refrigerator. The pie smelled like childhood, like her grandmother's house, with its sugary crust, white flour, and warm sweetness. Lena covered the pie with a white napkin, placed her palm on it, and closed her eyes for a moment. Her breathing calmed. She and the pie seemed to have an understanding. Everything would unfold as it should. Her phone gave a short beep. A message from Andre. "We're waiting. Don't rush. I'll meet you at the entrance." Below the message was a waving hand emoji and a small heart. Lena smiled and replied, "Coming." Andre's parents' house was in an old neighborhood with quaint courtyards and tidy intercom systems. Years ago, it was built with spaciousness in mind, so the stair landings were wide, the steps gentle, and the windows in the stairwell large, like those in a school. A polished plaque on the wall read Semyonov's. The building didn't smell of cats or fried food. It smelled of old wood, cleaning supplies, and a hint of expensive perfume. Andre was all ready by the intercom. He wore a beige coat and scarf and held a small box wrapped in white paper. He saw Lena, stepped towards her, took the pie, and quietly asked, "How are you?" "Fine," she replied, striving for an even tone in her voice. "A little nervous." "I'm here," he said. "Always." Lena nodded, and they ascended to the 3rd floor. A small fir branch lay on the doormat. Perhaps a cat had brought it in, or a neighbor had dropped it. Andre pressed the doorbell. Footsteps were heard from behind the door, followed by a soft click. The door opened. A woman in her 50s stood before them, wearing a light blouse and pearl earrings. Her face was beautiful and well-maintained, her gaze direct and appraising. This was Olga Viktorovna, Andre's mother. She nodded, a slight smile playing on her lips, and said, "Hello, Elena. Come in. Andre, help with my coat." Her voice was polite, but it was the kind of politeness that didn't invite intimacy. Lena smiled and stepped into the entryway. The apartment smelled of something savory, perfume, and fresh apples. Photographs from various countries adorned the walls. An old bridge, a statue in a square, a lake view. On a shelf were 3 framed pictures of Andre as a child, in the 1st grade with a large bouquet of asters, wearing a pioneer tie at a summer camp, and on a bike path wearing a helmet. "Father is in the kitchen," Olga Viktorovna announced. "He's pouring tea, and you can place the pie here." She gestured to a small table. "What a wonderful aroma! Is it apple?" Lena asked, removing the napkin from the pie. "According to my grandmother's recipe." "Excellent," Olga nodded. "I bake sometimes too, though mostly strudels. German classics." The word strudel sent a barely perceptible pang through Lena. It didn't hurt, not yet. "Strudel, how lovely." Andre's father, Viktor Pavlovich, entered the kitchen. He was portly, broad-shouldered, with a warm smile and a large teapot in his hands. "Well, hello, Elena," he said. "It's good to finally see you in person, not just in a photograph." "Andre, help set the table." "Hello," Lena replied, and suddenly felt a sense of calm. There was something familiar about this man. Perhaps his direct manner of speaking, perhaps his gaze, which didn't conceal his thoughts. Such a look belongs to those who have seen much and dislike fuss. The table was neatly set, salads in glass bowls, fish on a white platter, bread in a woven basket. Small plates with sliced lemons, herbs, and pickled cucumbers were arranged around the edge of the table. Not a crumb marred the tablecloth. Lena placed her pie on an empty spot. Olga slid a napkin toward him as if marking a place on a map. They sat. Olga Viktorovna, to Lena's right. Opposite, Viktor. Beside him, Andrei. Olga began to speak as people accustomed to maintaining order in their home do. She talked about how well the fish had turned out, how the pickles were often unevenly salted at this store in winter, how it was best to boil the kettle twice, and how bread in Germany was completely different. "Elena, you mentioned where you work?" Olga inquired, pouring tea in a thin stream. "Where specifically?" "At the gymnasium. I'm a teacher," Lena answered. "With the senior and middle school students." "A teacher." "I see," Olga drew out. "That's good, isn't it, Victor?" "Everyone has their preferences," he said. She spoke easily and confidently. There was nothing in her words yet that Lena could latch onto. Lena responded concisely. She didn't want to impress or to make excuses. She simply wanted to show who she was. Calm, hard-working, without unnecessary pretense. Olga periodically shifted the conversation to topics like the best places to vacation, which stores were reasonably priced, and where one found decent company. Lena listened, nodded, took a sip of tea, and smiled when Andrei quietly commented on the silly labels on the bottles. It was important for her to maintain a steady course. When the fish was finished and the table slightly cleared, Olga Viktorovna's expression changed. She nudged a plate slightly, took a napkin, and placed it precisely across her knees, a gesture Lena had come to recognize. This was how Olga began discussing topics she considered serious. "Elena," she began, "where do your parents work?" Lena replied calmly, "My mother is an elementary school teacher. My father worked in a military unit, then started a small construction business. We live modestly, but harmoniously." "Teachers, how noble," Olga said, her tone suggesting she was momentarily considering the word in relation to one of her acquaintances. "Andre, by the way, was more inclined towards the exact sciences since childhood. Perhaps we all agree on that." "I like everything to be in its place," Andre chimed in, smiling at Lena and nodding at her neatly folded napkin. "Look, even Lena's napkin is straighter than mine." Lena smiled, and Olga seemed to avert her gaze for a second. It was as if she expected Lena to say something out of line, but Lena's words were measured, slightly disrupting her prepared script. A little later, as the conversation turned to vacations, Olga Viktorovna subtly switched languages. From the first word it was clear, German. She spoke it naturally, as if she always did when discussing something among her own that others didn't need to know. She said it while looking at Victor. Lena lowered her gaze into her cup and remained motionless. She understood every word perfectly. German was her professional domain, but now that domain had become a battlefield where she was being assessed. Victor quietly responded, "She is kind, and Andrei loves her." "Liebe ist gut," sagte Olga, "aber Familie ist mehr als Gefühle. Schau dir die Hände an und den Schmuck. Es gibt kein Niveau. Love is good, but family is more than feelings. Look at the hands and the jewelry. There is no level." Lena sat still. She had always taken care of her hands. In school, hands are very important. Her jewelry had always been simple, mementos of her mother and grandmother. The words "no level" resonated like thin paper that could unexpectedly become a sharp knife. "Vielleicht wächst," Victor ventured cautiously. "Perhaps we shouldn't be afraid." "Angst vor," I'm not afraid. I want the best for my son." Lena slowly raised her head and met Victor's gaze. He looked at her, not with estrangement, but with something akin to guilt, as if asking for forgiveness for not stopping the conversation. Olga threw a few more phrases into the air. They touched upon social circles, residency, and formal receptions. Lena felt a chill rising within her, but she breathed evenly. She had been taught not to respond to rudeness with rudeness, not to give in to the urge to put someone in their place with a sharp retort. There was another kind of strength, to speak at the right time, calmly, without shouting. She looked up at Olga and said in German, "Cleanly, calmly, evenly. Dank für den Abend. There's danke für, thank you for the evening. The tea is very good, and thank you for your candor. It's useful to hear what people say when they believe they aren't understood." Olga froze. The teaspoon in her hand paused for a fraction of a second above the saucer and, barely touching the porcelain, clinked. Victor slowly placed his cup down. Andrei shifted his shoulder. "What?" he asked. "Lena, I understand everything," Lena said in Russian. "Both German and what you intended to convey." She turned her gaze to Olga. "I'm not angry. I just want to be known for my actions, not for a collar or earrings. I'm not good at attending receptions, that's true. I know how to work, teach children, bake pies, and be with the person I love." Silence fell. In that silence, the distant drip-drip from the bathroom could be heard. A faucet somewhere was ticking. Andrei slowly rose from his chair. "Mom," he said cautiously, "you don't have to do this." Olga Viktorovna opened her mouth as if to say something sharp, but no words came. She unexpectedly pursed her lips, averted her gaze. Lena stood up, thanked them again for dinner, and picked up her coat. "I'll go," she said softly. "Andrei, we'll be in touch." Andrei stepped forward sharply. "I'm with you." Olga shrugged her shoulders. "Why create a drama?" she said, her tone almost habitual, but her voice trembled. "Because it hurts," Andrei replied. "And because I won't allow anyone among us to be humiliated today." Victor stood up with them. "I'll escort you," he said. "Elena, please forgive me. This wasn't supposed to sound like this." Lena nodded. "It sounded exactly as it should have, so we could understand each other." The stairwell was cool, the walls light and clean, and on the handrail a single trace of someone's palm. Victor stopped before pressing the elevator button and looked at Lena. "You said the right words," he said quietly. "Not everyone can do that." "I didn't want to put anyone in an awkward position," Lena replied. "I wanted respect, at least ordinary respect." "The hardest thing is to admit that aloud," Victor said. "Forgive us, and give us time." The elevator arrived slowly. The doors opened like book pages. They descended in silence. On the first floor, Victor lingered for a second. "Elena," he said, "I truly hope you won't leave our lives because of tonight's events." "It doesn't depend on the evening," Lena replied. "It depends on what happens next." Andrei took Lena's arm. Outside, the air was damp and warm. They walked in silence to the bus stop. Then Andrei quietly said, "Forgive me." "It's all right," Lena replied. "You didn't say those words, but now you've seen how they sound." "I'll talk to my mother," he said firmly, earnestly. "And if it doesn't work out, we'll still be together. We'll find another language." Lena nodded. "I don't want a war, but I want to be respected, and I want you by my side when things are difficult." "I will be," Andrei said. Lena spent the night almost sleepless. Sometimes it felt as if the silence roared like the sea when you turn your back to it. She would get up, go to the window, and look at the courtyard. A lamppost, dark treetops, an empty bench. She'd lie down again, thinking about how strangely languages sometimes intertwine. One is learned for work, another for life. And if the former can be difficult, the latter is even more so. The language of respect, the language of simplicity. In the morning, she arrived at school earlier than usual. The classrooms were empty, the corridor smelled of chalk and a damp rag. Lena walked past the schedule board and opened her classroom. On the board, yesterday's words remained: Freundschaft, friendship. Lena smiled and nodded. Work always saved her. Neat notebooks, familiar topics, attentive eyes. During the first lesson, she spoke about articles, the second about tenses, and the third they sang a simple song with repeating words like steps on a staircase. The children raised their hands, laughed, got confused, and tried again. By the end of the day, she felt the heaviness lifting from within. As Lena left the school, her phone gave a short beep, a message from Andre. "Mom is asking for your number." "May I?" Lena replied, "Yes." An hour later, a call, an unknown number, a familiar voice. "Elena," Olga Viktorovna said, "may I come visit you? I'll say a few words. I won't take long. I'll speak quietly." Lena paused for a second, then said, "Come." Olga arrived without makeup, wearing a simple raincoat and carrying a bouquet of small daisies, the same kind Lena had brought to their house yesterday. She took off her shoes at the entrance, placed them on the mat, and looked around as if trying to understand what was most important and what was superfluous in the home. "It's clean here," she said softly, "and it smells of apples." "The pie is from yesterday," Lena explained. "It was delicious." They sat in the kitchen. Olga was silent at first, then said, "I was wrong yesterday. I don't know why this coldness comes over me when it comes to my son. Perhaps fear, perhaps a habit of keeping everything at a certain level. And level is sometimes just a wrapper. You removed that wrapper yesterday, and I wasn't ready for it. Please forgive me." Lena looked at her attentively. "Everyone makes mistakes. It's important that you came." "I came because I want to understand you," Olga said. "You're not like the people I'm used to talking to. You don't make excuses, and you don't attack. It's disarming, and it's teaching me. I would very much like—" She paused. "I would very much like us to try again, from a clean slate. I know how to bake strudel, but sometimes it's simpler to start with compote." She smiled shyly. "I brought daisies. I know they are simple, but today I want simple things." Lena took the bouquet and placed it in a jar. They poured tea. They talked about trivial matters, about curtains, about books, about what poems the children read at the gymnasium. There were no levels in their conversation. It was, "How are you? How are you doing? How are we?" Before leaving, Olga said, "I'm terribly afraid of losing my son when he gets married. I'm afraid he'll leave and not come back. I understand that intellectually, but my heart often does foolish things. Thank you for not closing the door. Thank you for knowing how to speak as you should." "It doesn't always happen that way," Lena replied. "Sometimes everything inside screams, but there is music. It helps. I sometimes ask the children to sing in class if an argument starts. A song doesn't solve the problem, but it evens out breathing." "I wish I could learn to sing instead of lecturing," Olga chuckled. "I'll try." They said goodbye. At the door, Olga hesitated. Yesterday," she faltered. "You could have said things differently, but you said them in a way that I heard. That's rare. Thank you." "I heard you first," Lena replied, "and then I decided how to speak." A week later, Lena and Andre visited the Semyonovs again. The hallway was just as clean, but the atmosphere was different, softer. Olga greeted them in a simple dress, without jewelry, but with a genuine smile. The table was set with simple dishes, potatoes, salad, fried chicken. Lena brought a pie, and Olga bought a cake from a bakery near their home. "I decided to start simply," she admitted. "We'll have time for complications later." Victor brought out an old record player and put on a jazz record. Music filled the room without interfering with conversation. Olga occasionally glanced at Lena, as if wanting to confirm that everything was truly all right. Lena met her gaze. "Yes." And Olga exhaled. At the end of the evening, Olga said, "I've been thinking a lot about how to address you. May I?" "Yes." "Well, I thought about how to say something important to you in German, but I realized that it's important to speak in a language that the heart hears without words, so I'll say it in Russian. I'm glad to have you in our lives." Lena nodded. "And I'm glad too. Thank you." Andre sat beside them, smiling silently, the way people smile when they suddenly feel unburdened. They had their wedding in early summer. It rained that morning, fine as a golden thread that unexpectedly fell from the sky and cast a bridge between the rooftops. Then the sun came out, and a rainbow arc, short but very bright, lay directly on the square. Only the closest family and friends were present for the ceremony. Afterward, they went to a nearby cafe with white tablecloths and wooden chairs where the coffee smelled truly authentic and the pastries were not too sweet. Olga Viktorovna asked for the floor when they raised their glasses of fruit drink. She stood, placed her hands on the back of her chair to steady them, and said, briefly, "I once thought my German would save me from awkward situations, but it turned out that no language can save you if pride is in your head, and no language is needed if there is respect in your heart. Lenochka, thank you for the lesson. Andrei, thank you for being you. Victor, thank you for being here." She smiled, and it was a genuine smile. "I love you all." The first to applaud were the children, Lena's students, whom she had invited to briefly visit, listen to music, and eat a pastry. They clapped sincerely, without thinking about how to do it correctly, and in that there was so much purity that the adults smiled at each other as if they had reached an unspoken agreement. Life after the wedding took its course, not smooth like marble, but alive like a wooden bench. The entryway smelled of soup, overly strong tea, hurried trips to stores, and long weekends at her parents'. Sometimes minor disputes arose about curtains, shelves, or where to put flowers. But these disputes never escalated into war. They ended where laughter began, and where Lena knew how to say, "It's important for me not to win, but to be heard." Andrei learned this alongside her. Sometimes it came easily, sometimes after a second try. Olga Viktorovna called him frequently, but always at the right time. Sometimes she asked for recipes. Sometimes she asked how to say a particular word in German. She began visiting without pretense, in simple sweaters, comfortable shoes, with a jar of pickled cucumbers in her bag. Lena and Olga would sit in the kitchen, warm up the kettle, and share the little things that make up life. Today the boys in class mixed up their articles and laughed. Today Victor fixed the faucet himself. Today Andrei brought home a silly cactus and said it was our family hedgehog. On Sundays Victor would smooth his mustache, bring buns in a paper bag, and say, "I was just passing by." They listened to old records together, and sometimes Lena would ask him to recount how he got stuck at a station during a winter business trip and had to stoke the stove with old newspapers. Victor would tell the story with pleasure and always conclude, "The main thing is to have someone beside you with whom you can be silent." Sometimes Lena's thoughts returned to that first evening at the Semyonovs. She saw the table, the white tablecloth, the slender teaspoon hovering over the saucer. She heard those unexpected German phrases in her mind, and each time she felt gratitude. Yes, precisely gratitude, because without that conversation, however awkward and painful, there wouldn't have been this current one, warm, simple, and real. True family is where understanding happens without translation, and everyone who came to the house read that simple phrase, smiled, and sat at the table because the tea was already boiling, the pie was cooling, and the conversation had already begun. Quiet, human. And that was the most important thing. Not winning an argument, not proving a level, not mastering a complex grammatical construction, but that in this house they had learned to speak a language understood by anyone who came with good intentions, a language of respect, a language for which no dictionary was needed. If you asked Lena what she took away from that encounter, she would say, "Don't fear silence, don't fear speaking concretely, and never confuse pride with dignity."